Okay, we'll start again. Kumlen Rabak Gemara. Today's daf is daf Chofei Amar Aleph. Let's start from the mission again. Ain't kaidin. You don't take kriya v'lecholti. Nor do you bend your shoulders. Ve'mevari. Nor do you give out your food to the avelim. You know, the first day that someone else gives you the food. Ela kreivav shel mes. Only if you happen to be a relative of the deceased. And we'll still talk about that in the morning. Ve'mevarin elamitas kufa. And you don't give the food to the people who want to console the avel. They sit on normal beds upright. It's only the avel, who sits on a turned over bed. Says the Gemara. So it sounds from here that the only people that you do kriya for is for those 7 relatives. Says the Gemara, "Va'afilu chacham," even the person who passed away is a chacham. But Tanya, we learned chacham shemeis. If a chacham passes away, hakol kreivav, everyone is a relative. Says the Gemara, hakol kreivav, everyone is a relative. Hakol kreivav. So we see from here clearly that for a chacham, even though it's not your relative, you still do kriya. So why does the Mishnah say only for your relatives? Hakol kreivav, kriya. Hakol chosel your shoulders. Hakol bevarim love berchava. Everyone, you sits out in the street, and then people you provide them food. So everyone, you have avelas, even if it's not your relative. No, we needed the lav chacham, a person who is not a chacham. So then, only if it's your relative do you take kriya. Says the Gemara. So what if you're not a chacham? The adam kosher, even if you're not a chacham, but if you're a righteous person, then you still have to take kriya. Tanya, we learned why does something happen that somebody's young children pass away? People should start, training themselves that they should have a cry and mourn an upright person who passed away. So the Gemara, we want him to cry and we want him to to mourn. That's why sometimes, so we see that for Adam Kasher, you have to mourn as well. Says he wanted what we're taking up guaranteed about the future, taking some kind of security to make sure that so we don't take away somebody's children, so that in the future he should cry and mourn on Kasher. Because in past tense he didn't do the right, give the right respect. So what do we see from here? Any more conclusion? Anybody who cries and mourns an Adam Kasher, they forgive that person for all their sins because you're showing cover to another person. So forget about being a relative. Anybody, if it's an Adam Kosher, it's the right thing to do to mourn them. So we're talking about the Lav Adam Kosher. We're talking about a person who is not an upright person, a righteous person, and therefore only if it's a relative you have to mourn. Says the Gemara, even then, if you were there present when the person passed away, even if the person was not an Adam Kosher, if you were present, you need to take kriya. The Tanya learned, a person standing next to somebody who departed, needs to take kriya. What is that compared to the Sefer Torah Shenifra? It's compared to Sefer Torah that got burnt because a person, near mitzvah of Torah, and a person, the Shama is called Neid Hashem Nishmas Adam. So therefore, you have to take you have to take kriya. You have to take kriya. So even for a person who's not an Adam Kosher, if it's not your relative, you have to take kriya if you happen to be present. Says the Gemara, I'm talking about a case where not an Adam Kosher, wasn't a righteous person, nor were you present at the time, then only if it's your relatives do you actually have to mourn. Says Gemara, Kinoch Nafshe, that Absafra, when Absafra passed away, Loi Koru Rabbanon Alei, the Rabbanon did not take kriya for Absafra. Amri, they said, like Amrina Mine, we never learned anything from him, so therefore why should we take kriya? He said, Mi Tanya Harav Shemeis Chacham Shemeis Tanya. So your rabbi says, any Chacham is a great person. You have to mourn them. Furthermore, every day we hear things in the name of Rab Safra. So easy, teacher. So they thought, okay, it's too late. Okay, they missed the chance. Didn't we learn as long as they're still occupied, they're still preoccupied in doing the eulogy, even though it might be a day after he passed away, you still do kriya. So it's not too late. No, so so they thought, okay, let's take Kriya right now on this Rav Safra. Abaye said, Tanya, we learned Chacham Kvoidei behespedei, that when is the right time to do it? During the hesped. That hasn't happened yet. Kinoch nafshe Rav Huna passed away. They thought they should place a Sefer Torah on his bed to demonstrate to everyone that the Rav Huna kept it tired. They did that for Chizki HaMelech, so they wanted to do the same thing for Rav Huna. Amr said, Rav Huna, while he was alive, he was adamant that you're not allowed to sit on a bench or on a table with a Sefer Torah, and now that he passed away, you're going to place a Sefer Torah on his coffin. So now that he passed away, you're going to do it for him. What are we talking about? He wants to sit on the bed. He noticed the Sefer Torah sitting there. The Kav Koda, they turned over a seat on the ground, but place Sefer Torah on that. Alma Kasa, what do we see from here? He holds also Leisha Agabi Bitish Sefer Torah Monochlei, and I'll sit on the bed, the Sefer Torah is on it. So therefore the same thing, how can you place a Sefer Torah next to Rav Huna? Says the Gemara, Allah having Nafik Puria, but then had a problem. The bed that they placed Rav Huna on it was not able to squeeze out through the doorway. So they thought, okay, let's just show the of the Gagin, let's take it through the roof. We learned it's not by Kabbalistic to take a mace and take it out of the house through the roof. It has to go through the front door. So okay, let's change beds and get a narrower bed. It'll fit through the door. We learned from him where he passed away. That's where you should take him out with. How do you know that it's more about coveting to use it for his bed? We see by the Aron, it says by Yakivu es Aron Elokim El Agola Chadosha. That David HaMelech took the Aron from the house of Aminadav and he used the same wagon that the Plishtim sent the Aron. The Plishtim confiscated the Aron by Eli from the Mishkan, and when they brought it back, they decided to wheel it with the same wagon that the Plishtim brought it. So the same thing with the mace. So what did they do? Potter's Baba, they broke the front door. And they took him out. He said that Abuna was such a great tzaddik that he deserved that the Shechina should rest on him. He should be like a prophet. The fact that it was a chutz la'aretz that caused that he wasn't able to become a prophet. Moser Nachman, or have the Shechina rest on him. Moser of Chanachman Chizda, either of Chizda son of Nachman or Chizda son of Chanam. And they said, how can it be? You're telling me that Abuna was deserving. And the problem was that he was a chutz la'aretz. We found that there is a Navi who exists in a chutz la'aretz, none other than Yecheskel ben Buzi. It says in the pasuk, Hoya Dvar and Yecheskel and Buzi, the words of Hashem was related to Yecheskel while he was in the Hakoyim, Be'eretz Kasdim, while he was in Babel, in chutz la'aretz. Tofech le'avu b'sandala. Rav Chizda gave his son a smack. Amalei, or give him a bang. Amalei says, Lava, I'm going to tell you, like, Alma, you stop asking all these questions. Why? Look in the pasuk. My hoya shahaya kvad. It only happened, either it only happened once before, or Rashi gives another pshat. He was in Eretz Yisrael the first few times that Hashem that he prophesied about certain things, and then once he was a prophet, he was able to go to Babel. But Abuna, who was always in Babel, wasn't able to have the Shechina rest on him. Kaskul Hasan, when they brought Rav Huna to Eretz Yisrael, Amru Leila Rabami, they told Rabami that Rav Huna came. Amru, they said. If you remember, we had a few times that Rav Ami and Rav Asi were felt as, I guess, inferior to Rav Huna in the presence of Rav Huna. Rav Huna was such a great Amoida. And when they heard Rav Huna now was coming to Eretz Yisrael, they used to live in Babel, and then they moved to Eretz Yisrael. When they heard that Rav Huna was coming to Eretz Yisrael, they said, Kavin Hasan, when we lived in Babel, we could never raise our head while he was around because he was so superior. And now, now that we came here, he's coming after us. He wants to make sure that we're inferior as well. They said to him, don't get so excited. Unfortunately, he passed away. He's coming in a coffin. He went out to escort the coffin, but they didn't go out. Or others say that Eila also went to escort the coffin, but not Rab Chanina. The Nafi, my time, of those that did go escort, why the Tani learned, that an Aron, even though it's not the original place where the person passed away, you had a Levaya in one place and then you moved it to another place. You go through all the rituals of Levaya just like the first time. Even though it's like the second place, you do the same thing over again. You repeat the whole exercise. So you go through all the exercise, do the bracha of Avelim and console Avelim, even though it's been moved from the first place. The line of for those who didn't want to escort my time and why, because they found another brayso. The Tanya, where there it says, the Aron that was moved from one place to another, ain't eindim olav b'shur. The second place, you don't go through the whole funeral process again. You don't do that. It says in Moed Katan Daf, we have a contradiction of two braysos. Like Kash is not a problem. Kan sheshalda kayemis, if the entire structure of the body is still existing, then even the second place, you have to go through all the entire funeral, all over the procession again. Kan b'she ain't shalda kayemis, but if the structure of the body is not intact, then you don't do it again. It says his structure was still there. But the line of for those who didn't go out, like Saimu Kamei, they didn't hear the end. They thought that it's a long trip, and by the time it got there to throw, perhaps his skeleton was no longer in full form, and therefore they didn't go. Amri Heichen and Chadin started saying, so where should we bury Rav Huna? So they said like this: Rav Huna Ribas Taida Rav Huna is unbelievable that he spread Taida throughout the Eden. And Rab Chia, the great Rab Chia, Ribas Taida B'Yisrael. Rab Chia was unbelievable. We're going to learn Ksubas there, and Bab Metzia, that he spread Taida throughout the world. Haviman Ma'ayile. So who is going to? Ideally, he should be buried next to Rab Chia. Who has the Rab Chia was such a holy man? Who is going to bring the coffin of Rab Huna to Rab Chia? Rab Chana said, "Ano Ma'ilina. You know what? I'll do it." The Okmisla Tamudoi Kahavina I knew the entire Shas well by the time I was 18 years old. We had a few other Amarang who said the same thing. Well, nor will I ever tame and I served him as well, so I have a connection to him. And in fact, I know so many things about him, how firm he was and how pious he was. One day he said, one day the black side went the wrong way, turned over. The Yosef Aboyim Tanisa, he sat there and he fasted 40 fast days. There's no need for that, but he did it. No, so he took the coffin to bury next to Chia. Now, where Rab Chia was buried, his two of his sons were buried right next to him. How they go to Yehuda Mimin Davor. Yehuda was on the right side of his father, the Chizkim Ismail, the Chizkim on the left side of his father. Amalei. Yehuda Lechizkiah. So Yehuda, these are people who departed. Yehuda said to Chizkiah, and the way Rashi learns, this is what happened. Let's move aside and make space for Rav Huna. The Lav Oidach Ada, remember they all passed away already. The Lav Oidach Ada, it's not proper to koyim Rav Huna. So it's not proper to koyim Rav Huna. That it's not proper that Rav Huna should have to stand there and wait until we find a place to bury him. So what happened was Bahadid the Koyim when Chizkiah and Rav Yehuda, Rav Chia's sons who passed away, were sort of moving themselves away. Come Bahadid Amudinur, out of their graves came this wall of fire. When Rav Chava saw that, he was frightened. He thought, who knows what's going to happen? That he was threatening his life. So what he did was that he took the Aron, he stood up, vertical, to use that as a shield to protect him from the fire. Then he went out. Why wasn't he harmed? By standing up the Aron, he was protected. That's the story of Rav Huna. Gives you an idea what kind of great tzaddik Rav Huna was. We already had before that Rav Huna was a very big tzaddik. When Rav Chizda passed away, they also thought they wanted to put him there on his bed. His own Rebbe, Rav Chizda was a student of Rav Huna. So Rav Huna, we already learned before, you shouldn't have a bed placed on the same height as you and you want to put it on the bed of Chizah. And you should do that, put it on the bed of Chia. Sover, they thought the Mishmal Karayu. They thought, okay, now that you tore Kriya for a great Talmid Chacham, you can no longer mend it. Kivon, since the moment, okay, you tear Kriya, the moment you turn around, is Shaylin, you can go ahead and you can mend it. Not a full mend, but at least a partial mend. You don't have to wait till after 7 days, like you wait by parents. When Rabbi Huna passed away, Askinu lahasam, they were bringing these bodies up to Eretz Yisrael. As Ashi explains, there's an advantage of being buried in Eretz Yisrael, that it atones for all your sins. It says in Exodus. Okay, so they were going to bring up these two great people, Rabbi Huna's son Rabba and Rabbi Nuna. They were going to bring them to Bavel. But what happened was, Kimotu Agishra Kamegamla, when they came to the bridge, when they came to the bridge, Kamegamla, the camel stopped. They refused to go. You could only go a single file. And so both camels decided not to go because they were having a discussion, the two people who deceased, who should go first. So this nomad, or this traveling merchant, said to them, my what's going on? Why the camel stopped going? Of the Yikaradodi, what's happening here is that the Rabbi Bar Huna says, let Rabbi Nuna's camel go first, and Rabbi Nuna said, let the Rabbi Bar Huna's camel go first. They both passed away. They were giving each other respect. So one of them said, let the other one go first. One said, let this one go first. So this Taya said, Dinahu, it makes sense that the Rabbi Bar Huna Leo Beresh. Rabbi Bar Huna should go first, because not only was Rabbi a great man, but his father Rav Huna was a great man, as we just learned. So what happened was Cholif Gamla the Rabbi Huna. So then the camel of Rabbi Huna proceeded to go, and Nosu Kavya and Shana, and the jaws and the teeth of this soicher, traveling soicher, this Arab soicher, fell out of his mouth because he insulted Rab Hamnun, Dahutaya, from that traveling person. A bit hard to understand because a minute ago there was each one. In other words, if Rabbi Bar Huna went first, then Rab Hamnun, that's what Rab Hamnun always wanted. And yet Rab Hamnun was upset that this Taya said that Rabbi should go first, and therefore the Taya got punished. So it's a bit hard to understand. If you really wanted Rabbi Huna to go first, that's exactly what happened. What he's so insulted about. Maybe it's the reason that he gave. That Rabbi Bar Huna is greater because of the yichus of his father. Talking about it further, possible now we're talking, you can say a few eulogies, possible Ahu Yenuka, so this youngster, we have in the Zohar all the time. Ahu Yenuka was a great Talmid Chacham, but they were young. And he said the following, that Geza Yeshishim al Mabavel, you have a Geza, you have a student of Yeshishim, of very older, wise people. This came up from Babel. We're talking about these two, Rabbi Huna and Rabbi Nuna. The Imay Sefer Muhammad, and they came along with a Sefer of war. So Rashi says it's referring to a Sefer Torah. Why exactly the Sefer Torah is called a Sefer of Muhammad? Interesting. Or he means the war that they were both arguing which camel should go first. So anyway, cause a couple, Huchblon, two tragedies, two curses happened that two great tzaddikim passed away. Lidois Beshoid Vashever Habam Mishina. They came to see all the the pillaging and so on, and the terrible things that happened, and the tragedies. Like they came from Shin, they came from Babel, and cuts of Alalamai, and there was angry on the world, the Chamas men nefashos, and they stole the nefashos from the Eibush, and I was happy. We feel that we lost these great neshamas. The sum of them, Kala Chadosha, the Eibush is happy like taking a new bride, Rochav Aravas. Someone who's riding the clouds, Sasu Samech, the boy of love, and the Eibush is happy that when it's coming to him, Nefesh, Noki, V'tzadiks, these great neshamas. So that was the eulogy. Kinoch Nafshe de Ravina, when Ravina passed away, Paschalah who Sabdana, so came along this eulogizer and he said, to Modim Hani or Raish, these palm trees, the top of it was waving, swaying in the wind. Al Tzadik Katomala, and this Tzadik that was like a palm tree that only has, we learned in Sukkah, only has one heart, and his heart was totally, that was, didn't have a Yetzirah, only had a Yetzirah, like a palm tree. Noshim Lailas Kayamim, that we will treat that the nights should be like day, because Amesim Lailas Kayamim, because they learned by night and they learned by day. They didn't stop. So we're going to be sad by night and by day because they learned by night and by day. The next one is an interesting one. Amr Rav Ashi Bar Kippur. Rav Ashi said to Bar Kippur, Ahi Yaima, the day that I'm going to pass away, I want to know today while I'm alive, what are you going to say in my eulogy? My Amrit, what are you going to say in my eulogy? You know, there's a story that Ramah, his wife passed away very young. And he was married to the daughter of Rav Sholem Shachner, who was a student of Rav Yaakov Polak. A very big Talmud Chacham, very big tzaddik. Anyway, and his daughter passed away very young. So the Ramah made the eulogy for his wife, and it was they say it was the most moving, eloquent eulogy, and the Dibra Torah that he wove together was unbelievable. And a short while later, he turned around and he said to Rav Shachner, I would like to marry your second daughter. And Rav Shachner said, there's no way I'm going to give you my second daughter. He said, what do you mean? He said, that drasha that you gave was so eloquent, it was so good. You had to prepare it while my daughter's still alive. And any husband that can be cruel enough to prepare a hesped while the person's alive, I don't want as a son-in-law. And here Rav Ashi asked the professional eulogizers, do you have a eulogy prepared for me? Let me hear it. Okay, interesting. Amalei, so this eulogizer about Kippur said, I'll tell you what I was going to say. In Barazin Nofashal Heves, by a cedar tree, a fire fell down, which is referring to Rav Ashi passing away. Mayaso Ezobekir, so what would the little hyssops do of the wall? You know, what chance do they have? Or Leviosum, if the Leviosum was called the Chaka with hooks, the greatest fish, which is an analogy to, or a metaphor for Rav Ashi. Mayasa Dogireka, what should the small little fish in the little ponds do? What hope do they have? Is benafal shaitiv nafachika, if in a flowing river suddenly dried up, Mayasa may govern what the little ponds can do. Right, so he's saying that such a great loss, but what's going to happen? We're so bereft of this leadership. So the other eulogizer said, "No, I don't like this eulogy. The chaka v'shalhevet v'tzadika. Are you going to use a mushal of a hook or a flame against by tzaddikim? You compare it to Rashi. Doesn't sound right. Fire could be Gehenna, whatever hooks. It just doesn't sound right. Amina, and I say, my Amred, Amina, this is what I would say. Amina, all the mourners we should cry because we lost this great tzaddik. But not for the lost night of Rav Ashi, who was lost. This Neshama got lost. He's all right because he's going to Gan Eden. He's going to resting Gan Eden, but we are groaning because we lost this great tzaddik. Cholosh daite alayu. So he felt very bad, Avashi. He felt very bad, all these comparisons. These hapich, and he didn't like the fact that they called him a lost soul. These hapich karayu. He cursed them, but they couldn't walk anymore because something happened and their foot twisted around and they could no longer walk. When he actually passed away, these two people couldn't go there to do the hesped that they prepared. And Rav says, "Loy bar kippur cholot, loy bar oven cholot." That not bar kippur nor bar oven had to mourn me or bear their shoulder because they weren't there. Rav can also deal with Rav when he came to the Tigris River. Bar oven, he said, "Rav, why don't you stand up and say something?" In other words, Daven to the Abish that we should be able to cross this raging river, these rapids. And he said the following: "Bo reiv shlishis b'mayim." It is a pasuk where it compares the Yidden to a third. I guess either because we're three kind of Yisrael or a third, and Rava was equal to a third of that of Klal Yisrael. So he's asking, please, I want you to remember. Sometimes we went away from you like a woman who went away from her husband. Please do not treat us like like the bitter water that the woman drinks. Even though we don't evade it, don't punish us here while we're crossing the river. Abchana was the son-in-law of the house of the Nasi, like Kahavale Boni, unfortunately didn't have any children. Boy Rachmi continued davening, and eventually Kahavale had children. The very day the Havale that the child was born, Noch Nafshe. The very day the child was born, he passed away. Rav Chanan passed away. Pasach Aleh was Abdonah, so this eulogizer said, Simcha l'toigen epcha. Unfortunately, a simcha turned into mourning, or into distress. Sus and v'yogan nidvku be'simchasai. That joy and sadness, joined together, a partnership at a day that should have been a simcha, the day of the birth of a child that he didn't have for so many years. Menach beis chaninosai. And therefore, he moaned the day that he was supposed to be happy. Sorry, some young Nimko, in the time of the simcha, he instead of being happy, he was moaning, groaning. At the time when the child was born, he lost that chanina, that chen. So they decided, Asikule Chanan al Shmei. They called the child Chanan after his name. The father's name was actually Chanin, and they called him Chanan, as if deliberately not to call him the same name of the father, but close enough to remember, because the father passed away young. That's what it seems from here. Generally, we say we don't have to call somebody after someone who passed away young, but we have quite a number of cases where someone was named after his father because his father passed away before his bris. Kinoch Nach Rabbi Yechon passed away. Rabbi eulogized and said, "Kosher haloim Yisrael today. That is such a difficult day for Klal Yisrael. Ki yoyim bo Hashem as it just like the day where the sun set in noontime instead of waiting until the late afternoon. It's set during the day." The Chesiv says, "V'hoya b'yemahu. It will be on that day. V'aveis Hashemesh b'tzarayim, and I'll bring the what do you call it, the shemesh." The sun in the middle of the day. It's part of the Nabi was reprimanding, chastising the Chesiv. It says, what's referring to the day that Yeshio Melech, where Tanakh says he was an unbelievable tzaddik. He got rid of all the Avodah Zarah and he made Korban Pesach never happened for him. He was an unbelievable tzaddik. And this is the day of Yeshio that when he was killed, we had the Gemara before. That he was killed because he didn't consult the Kohen Gadol and the king and the king Pari killed him. He's so that day is like the sunset in the middle of the day because we lost the tzaddik. He was very young when he passed away. Kinoch Nafshe, Rabbi Yechon passed away yesterday. Ami Shiva or Shloshim. Ami sat for him Shiva, and then he also did Shloshim for his Rebbe. He just did it. It was his own little chumrah that he did. Even if it's your Rebbe that taught you everything, and you have to mourn, but not for 7 days and 3 days. Only 1 day. Kinoch Nafshe, that Rav Zayda passed away. So this person who gave a eulogy said, we already had his Megillah, Eretz Shiner Harav. The land of Babel gave birth, conceived, and gave birth to this great man, Rav Zayda. Eretz Tzvi, the land of the deer, which is a metaphor for Eretz Yisrael. Gidla Shewusha raised this desirable child. Oinola Omra Rakas. So Tveria said, "What was to us? Ki of the Klechem Das. We lost this beautiful treasure." Kinoch Nafshe, the Ravu passed away. Achisa Mude the Kisve Maya, that the walls of Kisari suddenly started to ooze water as if it was crying. Rabbi Yossi passed away. When Rabbi Yossi passed away, is what happened then is we're going to go through a number of people now that passed away and things that happened at that time. Shafu Marzavet Zapoida Damo. So all the pipes of Zapoida suddenly started to flow blood. And Taisa says because it was a decree that they shouldn't circumcise the children, and he was moist and nefesh that they should do bris milah, and therefore when he passed away, that's what happened. When Rabbi Yaakov passed away, the stars suddenly became so bright that even during the day they were able to see the stars. Either that or the sun became so dim, therefore they were able to see the stars during the day. When Abasi passed away, that all the trees got uprooted around where he was. When Abchia passed away, suddenly balls of fire came down from heaven. Menachem the holy man, he never saw a coin in his life, and the images on the coin, all the Avodah Zarah got destroyed. Even the sculptures or the drawing on the coins became flat. When Abtancho Bachia passed away, all the statues got uprooted. When Rabbi Yoshiv passed away, is his chatru Shivin Machtarta ben Adoi. When he passed away, there were no ganovim in his time, in his chus. As soon as he passed away, 70 tunnels were dug out for people trying to break into people's homes. The Chisa Kippe, the boredom of the Kiev, when Nuna passed away, balls of hail came down from the sky. The Rabbi of Rabbi Yosef, when Rabbi Yosef passed away, no, it didn't happen at the same time because Rabbi passed away a few years before Rabbi Yosef. But Noshuk, Kippe, the potters, when they passed away, so what happened was that the bridges of potters came close together. Hadodim. Rabbi Rabbi passed away. Noshuk, Kippe, the Tigris. So the Tigris River came together. Hadodim. Kenoch Nafshe, the Meshasha passed away. Toon Dikli Shitze. When Rabbi passed away, all the palms gave up and all that grew now were thorns. That ends today's blot.